Hello everyone and welcome to another video on our own devices. I'm Jean Messier and today we are having a look at a fascinating, if small, artifact from the Second World War. So small in fact that you probably can't see anything from all the way over there. So let's zoom in and have a closer look at what this is. So as you can see, this is an RCAF Tunic button, though not just any button, for if we unthread the rear, you can see that there is a small surprise hiding inside, a compass. And this is what is known as an escape compass, and several different varieties of this type of equipment was developed during the war in order to help downed Allied airmen escape from enemy territory. Now, in Britain, escape and evasion was coordinated by Department 9 of the British Directorate of Military Intelligence, better known as MI9. And one of the leading figures in MI9 at the time was a gentleman that we've spoken about before in my previous video on escape boots, Christopher Clayton or Clutty Hutton. And Hutton was one of the main inspirations for the character of Q in Ian Fleming's James Bond novels, and during the war he developed a number of ingenious escape gadgets, including the aforementioned boots, which had tops that could be removed with an included knife to yield a less conspicuous pair of civilian shoes. He invented wire saws that could be hidden inside bootlaces, and various methods of hiding escape gear. And early in the war, Hutton was approached by Johnny Evans, who was an MI9 liaison officer and who during the First World War had been one of the very few British airmen to successfully escape from a German prisoner of war camp. And he advised Hutton that the three types of equipment an escaping airman most needed were a map, a compass, and food. And he especially emphasized food because hunger could make an airman take unacceptable risks, such as going into town to beg for food, or stealing from farmers' fields, which could very quickly lead to him being captured. And so Hutton developed a number of highly concentrated emergency rations for airmen who were shot down behind enemy lines. He also developed a number of escape maps. One version was printed on Japanese mulberry paper so that it could be soaked in water and scrunched up into a very small ball that could be hidden in a number of ordinary objects, but unfolded and spread out with very few wrinkles. But perhaps his most famous invention was the silk scarf escape map. And originally, when he tried printing on silk, he found that the ink bled and smeared too much. But then he hit upon the technique of using pectin, which is used for setting jams, and this led to very crisp and legible maps. And then finally, there were compasses. So the first model escape compass was developed by London instrument maker Thomas Blunt. This had an aluminum body, 15.8 millimeters in diameter and 7.3 millimeters thick, with a red and black ring-shaped compass card. And these were actually double-sided, with both ends being sealed by a convex lens. Although it's not quite known why they were designed this way, one leading theory is that the lenses were intended for emergency firelighting. However, this early model was very quickly replaced with the Pillbox model, and this had a diameter of 15.25 millimeters and a thickness of 4.9 millimeters, and these were single-sided, with the open side being covered by a flat rather than a curved window. And the Pillbox compasses had bodies made out of brass, which, while a strategic material in its own right, was not nearly as strategic as aluminum, which was reserved for aircraft production. Now, early models had a star-shaped pointer with 2 dots indicating north and 1 dot indicating south, and these dots were filled with radioluminescent radium paint so that they could be used at night. Later versions, however, used a circular dial with large circular holes punched out of it in order to save even more material, but retaining the radium dots. Now, Pillbox compasses were designed to be hidden in a variety of ordinary objects, including buttons, which we'll get to in a second, hollowed-out compartments in flight boots, hairbrushes, things like that. They were also issued with a little clear plastic bag with a lanyard that could be worn around an airman's neck. And the plastic bag was so that the airman could actually swallow the compass to prevent it from being confiscated. And it could also be shoved up other orifices, hence why many airmen referred to this model as the hole compass. And then finally, there was a miniature compass, which had a diameter of only 6.35 millimeters, and this was intended to be hidden in even smaller objects, such as the barrel of a fountain pen or the stem of a tobacco pipe. Right, so before we move on and cover some even weirder escape compasses, let's have a closer look at this button. So this is actually an earlier pattern escape compass. You can tell because it has the star-shaped pointer on it, but also because the button has regular right-hand threads. So eventually the Germans caught on to these and started searching the uniforms of any airmen that they captured, So MI9 decided to reverse the threads so that when the Germans were inspecting the buttons, they would actually tighten up the buttons, and maybe a handful of compasses would escape detection. Now, in addition to hiding self-contained compasses inside buttons, MI9 also developed buttons that themselves acted as compasses, and there were two main types. The first was the Trouser fly button compass, and this was actually assembled from two separate stamped metal buttons, one of which had a little needle that the other one balanced on top of, and the second button was magnetized and had the radium dots to indicate north and south. The second type was the Vest or Westkit type, which was made of bakelite with a magnetic element molded into it and was designed to be suspended from a thread. And in both cases, the radium dots indicating north and south were painted on the rear of the button so that when they were sewn onto clothing, they were inconspicuous. However, this increase in concealability came at the cost of having to remove the buttons from your uniform in order to use them, which I imagine would have been something of a problem with the Trouser fly buttons, though if you happen to be a ground attack pilot, I would assume that you were used to flying low. Another clothing item that was turned into an escape compass was the belt buckle from early RAF Battledresses, and these were made of non-magnetic brass and had a little pop-out pointer built into the rear. There was also another type of swinger compass, which was simply a lozenge-shaped piece of magnetized metal with radium dots on it that was intended to be suspended from a thread. And these were supplied in pairs wrapped in paper and could easily be sewn into uniforms or hidden in a variety of common objects. One common method was to mold them into the spine of a plastic comb, which then had to be broken to reveal the compass inside. And in addition to airmen, these were also issued to British paratroopers, who were also likely to find themselves deep behind enemy lines. And finally, a number of non-clothing related items were modified to create escape compasses, including magnetized safety razor blades, which could be suspended from a string or floated on the surface of water, fountain pen nibs, which had a special indentation on the balance point so they could be balanced on the tip of a pencil, and finally, pencil clips, which also had the same balancing indentation on them. Now, despite the ingenuity of these and other escape devices, their actual effectiveness is up for debate because only around 7,000 downed Allied airmen made the full home run back to Allied lines, and the vast majority of those escapes were accomplished with the help of escape lines run by local resistance organizations, rather than escaped airmen traversing enemy territory on their own. On the other hand, however, one of the main reasons for escaping was not just to hopefully make it back to your lines and fight another day, but also to harass the enemy and force them to spend an inordinate amount of resources guarding and tracking down escaped prisoners, resources that could be better used elsewhere. So, in their own small but vital way, these devices did contribute to final Allied victory. Yet despite the large numbers of escape compasses issued during the Second World War, relatively few survive to this day, and they are highly sought after collector's items that fetch high prices. Indeed, the gentleman who was kind enough to lend me this one to do this video refuses to admit how much he actually paid for it. But still a fascinating piece of World War II equipment, and something I've been wanting to cover on this channel for quite some time. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time in another video or look at yet more escape equipment and other fascinating devices just like this one. Until then, I'm Jean Messier from Our Own Devices. Have a great day.